Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hi, welcome back to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, our special guest is Brianna Ladapo. She is an intuitive spiritual healer, movement therapist, and teacher. She has a master's degree in English from Harvard University and has studied traditional, she's going to have to help me, naturopathy, plant and herbal medicine, and shamanism. She lives in Florida with her husband and 3 boys, where she works with nonprofit organizations to heal trafficked and exploited children. So if I said any of that incorrectly, it's okay to fix it now, Brianna, but thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. And you said everything perfectly.
You're way kind to me this morning. So, Brianna, what inspired you to want to be a guest on our show? Do you have a personal history of trauma that you're willing to share a piece of?
Absolutely. I grew up in a family that was extremely religious. I would call them fundamentalist, and the one side was Catholic, and the other side was Protestant. And when I say fundamentalist, I mean to the point that each side really believed that the other side was going to hell. And I did not fit in, let's say that. I was born, and from the time that I can remember being on the planet, I had visions. I had angels. They would speak to me just like you and I are talking right now. I had no idea that experience might be unusual, because as a child, you define the reality through your own experience. So I was openly talking about what was happening to me to my family. And they told me that those things were satanic and of the devil. And so immediately in my family, I was essentially told, you are not okay. You are an affront to our belief systems. You're evil. And, these things I was experiencing to me were not only very real, they were how I stayed safe in the world and defined myself. And I go into this specifically in my book about some particular circumstances where I don't believe I would have survived without the influence of these divine interventions, as I call them. And but the more time I spent around my family, and the more they told me that these things were unnatural and evil, and that what had I done to bring this upon myself and bring this upon our family, and that I needed to repent, I started to make myself smaller, more acceptable, less threatening. And when I did that, my light went out. And immediately I started to have some really dark experiences. That's a very long story. I'm happy to answer any questions about it. But I believe just as light attracts light, darkness attracts darkness. And I went through some serious trauma, including many years of sexual assault, lots of physical trauma, lots of emotional trauma, particularly at the hands of my family. But of course, once you learn a particular trauma pattern, that tends to repeat, right? Your soul, it imprints upon you and acts like a beacon. So that I believe that we draw those experiences to us over and over again until we finally learn to deal with them and transmute that negative energy. So I had an uncanny number of sexual assaults, to the point that I really had to finally take a look at, okay, why is this happening? Like, what is it that I am energetically calling to myself? But so this went on for many years. And to fast forward a great deal for the sake of brevity, I had decided that I would never marry or have children after the way that I grew up and the amount of abuse and trauma that I not only experienced, but witnessed. I thought, okay, the world is a sick and difficult place, and I do not wish to bring children into it. But best laid plans. One day I was on a plane, and the most beautiful man, not just physically, but spiritually. I see people's auras in color, and this man was so beautiful. He walked on the plane, And I had just been on a trip with my girlfriends. We were in St. Thomas. I was gross, sunburned and dirty. And I thought, oh no. So I sunk down beneath my book in my plane seat and tried not to see this guy, but he started talking to me. And over the course of a very long and disastrous flight, I don't know if we fell in love that day. I think that I actually did. I just didn't admit it for about a year and a half after that. But in any case, we ended up getting married, and we now have 3 children. So not at all what I had planned. But the reason I bring that up is because though he was and is my favorite person in the world, and I never thought I'd get to experience that kind of relationship after what I went through. The thing about love is that it acts as a mirror, right? It reflects back to you anything that you have not yet dealt with. And my husband also comes from a very traumatized background, and he wouldn't mind me sharing that because he shared openly about that himself. Also experienced sexual abuse. And so in the early years of our marriage, it really was a challenge. Things got very, very ugly, and not because of anything between the two of us, but because of the trauma we were carrying from our respective pasts and all the intergenerational trauma we hadn't even figured out we were carrying. And as a result of our relationship nearly imploding, we'd sought a lot of help, but none of it was quite enough. We had done lots of traditional therapy, things like Landmark, Avatar, all kinds of programs that are helpful. I do think each one of them has something to offer. And I would always take what I could and move on, but none of it ever actually rid me of the trauma or the emotions surrounding it. And one day, my husband and I, we just didn't know what to do. The problem wasn't even between the two of us, but we couldn't escape our pasts, and it was destroying us. And we were on the brink of divorce. And I was confiding to a friend of mine that I was out of moves. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to help him or myself. And he said, I know someone you should meet. And at this point, I was willing to meet anybody, try anything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he said, why don't you read this guy's book? I guess it had been someone from his past who he had trained with for, I think, nearly 20 years. They'd spent a lot of years together. And he said, he's pretty out there, but check out his book and see what you think. And this man's name is Christopher Maher. And I ordered his book. It's called Free for Life. And
Say it again, the title?
Free for Life is the book.
Free for Life.
Free for Life. And I got it in the mail. And I didn't even need to open it because his picture was on the cover. And as soon as I saw him, I had this very deep and profound soul resonance. And I knew he was exactly who I needed to talk to. And boy, this is a very long story too, so I'll shorten it and then be quiet.
It's okay. It's a good story, so I think. I don't know the ending yet.
Absolutely. So my husband went first, under duress, my sweetheart. God bless him. He did not want to do this, but he did it for me. And because we were really out of options, and he went and spent a week with this man. And as long as I've known my husband, he has had a dark entity hanging on him. I was always able to see it. I didn't tell him for many years because most people are not open to that sort of thing. And it wasn't him. I could feel that it was something from his maternal ancestral line, something very dark. And so when he came home on Monday night, nothing much had changed from my sense except that he was more present. But then by Wednesday, this entity had moved a couple inches away from him and was sort of hovering next to him. So not gone, but no longer attached the way it was. And the whites of his eyes were brighter. And by Friday, that entity was gone. And my husband was fully embodied for the first time since I had met him. He was actually present. He was laughing with our kids, playing with them. And previously, any stressor would make him disappear. His physical body would be there and his soul would just vanish. It was scary. This man that I know so well and love so much would just cease to be there. And after he went to see Christopher, that never happened again. So of course I wanted to know, what magic were you doing over there for a week that has had such a profound effect after 15 years of trying everything? So I went to see him. And to fully describe the experience would probably take several hours. But the shortest way I can put it is that the healing I experienced with this soul was incredibly profound. And whereas I feel like everything I had done previously combined comprised maybe, let's say, a kindergarten level of soul education, this felt like straight to grad school. And he taught me how to literally transmute the trauma. So no longer were we just talking about it and working through the emotions of it. We were actually breaking down the energetic imprint of it and removing it. And I didn't even know this was possible until I met him. Boy, it's something that I wish everyone could have. It's the most profound work I've ever done in my life. And now on the other side of that, having finally, and it's a work in progress, of course, I experienced dramatic healing just that week and for several weeks after. And I've worked with him more since. And every single time I do, we strip away another big layer. So it is an ongoing process, but it's such deep work, and it's incredibly transformational, and it's permanent. And that I had never experienced before. It was so amazing for me that I lived in fear for 6 weeks, waiting for the other shoe to drop, thinking, when is it going to come back? When am I going to have an interaction with someone who reminds me of this person who assaulted me, or this member of my family? You know, things bring up your past. And I kept waiting for this to occur. It never did. And that was many years ago now. And what it's allowed me to do is finally step into who I really am, without all those experiences, without all the trauma, without the 7 generations that came before me of unresolved trauma that, of course, landed squarely on me and my sibling. And it's allowed me to break those patterns and interrupt the cycle and not put it on my children. And it's the greatest gift I've ever received.
Okay, I have questions.
Please.
So if you could tell the audience the name of your book, and the reason I'm bringing it up now is, did you describe this experience in your book?
Yes. The name of my book is Emerging from Darkness, and it's available now. It came out a couple of weeks ago. And I really take the reader through the whole story, particularly how it felt at every stage. I do tell my story, what happened to me as a child, just so that any reader who has experienced something similar knows first that I do understand, because I have been through it, and then what's possible. And then I take them through my experience of the healing with Christopher, things that happened to me before, during, and after, and a lot of what my life looks and feels like now, and particularly how I got to experience COVID and the lockdowns, and how I certainly would have experienced them before dealing with my trauma, and how I got to experience them after, which was profoundly different. And I would never diminish anyone else's experience, because we all have our own journey. But I got to have an amazing experience. And that the only reason that happened is because I had done the work to shed that trauma beforehand. So rather than having to really be locked into the narrative of fear that I think a lot of people were, well, some were pushing it, some were falling victim to it because of their experiences. And I would have been one of them, undoubtedly, had I still been in that same place. But because I got to transmute that trauma, I ended up having an incredible experience of getting really close to my children and starting to change my relationship with my husband. It's always been loving and wonderful, but we really became partners in a way that we never had before, in terms of creating the reality that worked best for us under those circumstances, really keeping anything resembling fear or trauma away from our kids and creating a magical world for them. We found a whole new community of like-minded, just wonderful families, friends, families, other kids for our kids. And they ended up becoming extended family, to the point where we celebrated every holiday, every birthday, and really every weekend that entire time together. And none of that would have been possible if I had been carrying around all the baggage that I accumulated as a kid, not to mention all the baggage that came before me that was never dealt with.
Right. How did the experience, the healing that you've had, and how did it change your your work, your mission, your purpose?
That's such a great question. I have, my whole life, I've always wanted to help. I enjoy helping, but I didn't realize that there wasn't a whole lot I could do because I couldn't get out of my own way. I was so entrenched in what I had experienced, and the pain was still very real, very fresh. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. In my case, it got triggered over and over by interactions I would have in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So that managed to keep it right at the forefront for you forever. And so I really wasn't, I don't think I was able to be that helpful. And it wasn't a lack of effort. I was trying as hard as I could, but I was very limited by my own experience. So post Christopher and all of this healing and learning how to transmute that energy, I'd like to think I'm able to be of much greater service, because now I can still recall all of the incidents. Of course, I can recall everything that happened. I can recall all the data, dates and times and people. But now when I think about it, there is absolutely zero emotional charge. So whereas, say, 5 years ago, if I had been telling someone my story, I would definitely be crying right now. I'd be in tears. I'd be reliving it. And now that emotional attachment to the experience is gone. And I think that would have sounded impossible to me before. I don't think I believe that was even something that you could manage to get to. I couldn't imagine how that could be. But I can tell you very truly from my own experience, I could sit here all day and share gory details, and I no longer feel anything about it. And that's really allowed me to move into a space where when I work with other people, especially kids, I work with a lot of children who have been traumatized in ways I sincerely wish did not exist on this planet, and hopefully one day won't. I don't want this job. I want there to not be a job to do in this realm. But since there is, and I've been through it and been just truly blessed enough to get to have this experience of learning how to transmute it, now I can sit with these kids while they recount their stories to me. And not only am I not personally triggered by it, and I feel like that removes the energy from them and puts it onto me. So not only do I not have to deal with that, I can really hold the space for them. I can be there energetically. While they're talking to me, I am able to not be embodied in my own trauma, but to be actually over there healing them to the best of my ability, even transmuting their trauma while they're speaking it. And that's not to say it's perfect. Of course, I work on this every day. I will for the rest of my life. But I can say with absolute certainty, it's made me a much more effective healer. It's made me a much better, I think, friend and partner. Because even when I'm not actively trying to heal somebody, it's much easier to show up for somebody else when you're not carrying so much of your own baggage and you're not being constantly triggered by what you're encountering in your life.
Right. Absolutely. Amen to that. So when you heal people, do you work with people one-on-one? Do you do any groups, courses, workshops? What does your practice look like?
So it's changed a bit. I've fairly recently moved to Florida. So I left my practice behind and now I'm reestablishing everything. So I definitely still work with people one-on-one. I work with nonprofits, so I'll go there and work with kids at the nonprofit center one-on-one and in groups. So one-on-one might look more like a traditional counseling session where we really talk through the nitty-gritty of what happened. And I will be healing before, during, and after that conversation and doing really intense one-on-one work with that child or adult. I work with adults too. But then a group session might look more like a mass meditation or group transmutation. It looks to the outside world. Sometimes it might look like we're just taking a walk around a lake and having a conversation or doing a simple guided meditation, but I'm working on much deeper levels energetically. So it really is a different experience, I believe, for every single person I work with, because I meet them wherever they are. So whatever is affecting them, whatever they're carrying, hairs in my eyes, whatever they need to be working on, that's how I show up for them. So sometimes it's as simple as having conversations, especially in the beginning, if someone is nervous or uncomfortable or new to even the idea of healing. We'll keep it very non-threatening and very simple. Someone who wants to go deeper, we might get more physical about it. So it just depends on what's best for the person I'm working with.
Mm-hmm. For people listening that may not have a good understanding of energetic healing, do you have any suggestions on things that they could read, or does your book describe it pretty well for them? Or can you give some definition?
Yes. So I find it difficult to give a definition because honestly, for every healer I've ever met, we all have a different explanation of how it works, because I think it comes down to our individual experience. I have been a channel my whole life, so I get a lot of my healing influence and ability directly from the divine. So some people are very comfortable with that, some not so much, but that is definitely my experience. I don't necessarily believe that I am the healer so much as the conduit, and I'm able to access that divine healing, that divine love, that divine alignment, and then share it with everyone that my soul is able to reach or touch. But someone else might describe a completely different process. So my first piece of advice for anyone looking for a healer is just find someone you resonate. Whoever that is, I feel like that's the first step, is just really to have an amazing connection with someone and be able to trust that person. And so that's always the first thing I would recommend, is find someone you like, find someone who makes you feel safe, who makes you feel joyful. And as far as books, I definitely recommend Christopher's book. It's a wonderful read. Again, that one is called Free for Life by Christopher Maher. I have to tell you, I have worked with many, many healers, intuitives, and incredibly gifted people in my life. I would call him the most gifted by far. For me, he gave me and my husband such a profound experience. I really can't recommend him highly enough. But of course, that's my experience. Someone else is going to resonate with somebody different. And then in my book, I do actually go into great detail. My entire last chapter is broken into multiple sections about actions you can physically take immediately to help heal yourself, to raise your vibration, to heal your body, your mind, your soul, to get more in touch with nature and the divine. To me, those two are inextricably linked. And that may not be everyone's experience, but it's certainly mine. When I am doing a healing for someone, I always make sure I am in or near the natural elements. The ocean supports me greatly, and I hear that from a lot of healers. But again, it's about finding what works for you. There's some experimentation involved, for sure. But I also got a lot out of looking at more natural approaches to overall health, like shamanism, naturopathy, holistic healing. I am generally of the belief that we have everything we need to heal ourselves already. It's just a matter of unlocking that puzzle, figuring out the code, if you will. So I am not necessarily one to first suggest turning to Western medicine, but that works for a lot of people. So, the older I get, the more people I work with and meet. The only thing I can tell you for sure is that for as many souls walking the earth, there are that many different paths to healing. So it is a bit of trial and error and just figuring out what really feels good to you. But my greatest piece of advice would be, if it doesn't feel right, it's not for you.
Yeah, listen to your inner wisdom. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I resonated too with the beginning of your story with the Catholic family, and then my other side of my family was Pentecostal.
Oh, wow.
So it was very similar to what you described. Yeah. Both grandmothers fighting on where I was going to go to church.
I can relate to that one.
Yeah. And despite it all, I turned out okay, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, for what it's worth, your aura is quite beautiful.
No, thank you so much. That means a lot. Well, that was, so I think your publicist sent me a copy of your book. I have not read it yet. It's in my queue because I have a lot of books ahead of it. But when I do read it, I will write a review. I am really eager to read it, especially that last chapter. I won't jump to the end because I'm one of those people that has to start it and I follow. I never jump to the end. It's not my personality. But I am looking forward to that chapter. It sounds beautiful. Now, for anyone listening and they really resonate with you, your message, they feel like, that you would be a good fit for them, how do they reach you? How do you want people to contact you?
The easiest way is probably my website. You can contact me directly there. I can also share the information of my publicist with you directly in case anyone contacts you. More than welcome to contact her. But I love talking to my readers, and so I do interact with my readers on Goodreads, and like the Amazon Author Program. So really any of that. But my website might be the easiest if someone has a question or is interested in speaking further.
And your website will be in the show notes, but can you say it for our listeners?
Certainly. It's just my name, www.briannaladapo.com. And that's BriannaLadapo.
Beautiful. I really appreciate the time that you took to be with here today to inspire my audience. And do you have any other words of wisdom that you would like to share today before we leave?
Just that I remember feeling at a certain point, several points really, but at my darkest, like there couldn't possibly be a way back. And no matter what's ever happened, I'm an optimistic person by nature. I really do try to find the joy in everything. So for me to have reached that point, as you can imagine, it took a lot. And unfortunately, I'm far from the only one. There are so many out there who have had or are having this experience. And I want to say to anyone feeling that way, I've been there. I really felt like there was no way back for a long time, but there is. And I'm living proof of that. And if there's anything I can do to help or uplift, I would love to do that. And I do hope that reading my book will really help a lot of people. I wrote it because it's something I went through, and I know there are so many of us that have been through similar things, even if it doesn't look exactly like what I went through or exactly like what she went through. There are so many walking wounded who really just are carrying such a burden on their heart. And so it's very important to me to let anyone in that situation know that there truly is a way to heal fully and completely. Really, really, truly, and you can do it. And there's all it takes sometimes is to reach out to somebody. So you're welcome. Reach out to me, reach out to a friend, whoever feels right for you. But yeah, that's all. I just want people to know that there really is a way.
Yeah, beautifully said, and I agree. There is a way. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Brianna. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.